In this video, I'm going to show you how to write a Java program that uses the JSCH library to communicate with an SFTP server. So we're going to go through the process of connecting to the SFTP server, authenticating, listing files, changing directories, downloading and uploading files. Okay, so first of all, let's look at the dependencies in build.gradle. Okay, so here are the dependencies. Okay, just one line here. Second, let's try to connect to the SFTP server. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create a JSCH object. Okay. Okay, the next thing we need to do is we need to create a session. So let's do session is equal to get session, and we just specify the IP address of the machine. Okay, so let's look at these errors. All right. So once we have the session object, we can connect that session. So we do session.connect. Okay. And when we're done with the session, we should also disconnect. Okay. Okay, so now let's try to run this program. Okay, so as you can see, we're getting an error. So the error that we're getting is UnknownHostKey. All right. So the reason we're getting this error is because JSCH doesn't know whether to trust this key or not, right? Because we haven't given it any indication of whether this particular key really does belong to 192.168.56.101 or not. Okay, so there's actually a quick fix to this issue, which is to just do session.setConfig strict host key checking, and we set this to no, right? So if we were to do this, we'll get a different error, right? So let's run that again. And as you can see, we get a different error. Now we're getting auth fail, right? But this is not the correct way to fix this issue, because doing it this way, which means that we're basically disabling the checking of the server's key, right? It defeats the purpose of using SSH, because we're no longer authenticating the server, right? So the proper way to fix this, so let's comment this out. The proper way to fix this is to create a known host file. Okay, so the known host file will contain a mapping between the IP address of the server and the public key of that server. Okay, so let's create that known host file. So we'll do new file and let's call it known host. Okay, and it will contain a mapping between the IP address of the server, right, as well as the public key. So the IP address is 192.168.56.101, and what will be included on the same line, separated by a space here, is the public key of that particular server. So what we need to do is we need to go to the SFTP server and we need to get its public key. So here is the SFTP server, right? I mean, this is the server that's running the SFTP server. What we need to do is we need to get the RSA public key of that server. Okay, so let's go to C drive program data, SSH, and let's look for the SSH public, the RSA public key. Okay, so here it is. This is the RSA public key, right? Let's copy that. Copy, and let's copy this particular key to the known host file. So let's paste that. Okay, and let's save it. Okay, let's save that. Right. So now that we've created the known host file, we need to tell JSCH, the JSCH library, to use this known host file. And the way we do that is we do jsch.set known host file, known host. Okay, so now that this is done, let's try running it again. And when we run it again, we should get auth fail rather than the unknown host key error. Okay, let's run it again. And let's have a look. And yes, we're getting auth fail rather than the unknown host key error. Okay, so whenever possible, try to resolve this issue by using the known host file, because if you do it using strict by disabling strict host key checking, like can be done with this line here, you kind of defeat the one of the benefits of using SSH, which is that SSH will help us to authenticate that we're connecting to the correct server. Okay. Okay, so now let's try to fix the auth fail issue. The reason we're getting this error is because we haven't provided any sort of credentials to the SFTP server. What we need to do is we need to set a username and some type of authentication mechanism. So let's first set the username. Okay, so in this case, the username is user1. Okay, so we're going to be connecting to the SFTP server as the user1. Now that we've set the username, now let's set the authentication mechanism. I always prefer to use some type of key-based authentication over password authentication. So let's create a key for user1. Okay, so the way we do that is a little bit different for JSCH, because JSCH doesn't support the default private key format that is generated by SSH keygen. So let me just show you the default format first. So SSH keygen -c -f user1. Okay. So when I generate this key, you notice that it starts with this header, begin open SSH private key. Okay. So at the time this video was created, JSCH does not support this header. Okay. However, I did a Google search and there are some forks of JSCH on GitHub that do support this. But for this video, I wanted to use the official version on Maven. Okay. So in order to rectify this, we need to create the key in a different format. Okay. So let's create it in, I guess it's called the PEM format. So let's do SSH keygen -c -mpm and then the name of the file. Okay. All right, let's override it. Okay, so now if you look at the file, the private key file, it starts with begin RSA private key, and this particular format is supported by the version of JSCH that we're using in this video. Okay, so now that we've created the key pair, right? So this is the private key and here is the public key. All right. Okay, and this is the public key. What we can do is we can copy the public key over to the server. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to copy this public key over to the authorized key file of user1 on the SFTP server. Okay, so let's go to the SFTP server running on Windows, and let us go to user1's home directory. Okay, so this is a terminal, this is a command prompt in user1's home directory, and let us modify user1's authorized key file. So let's go to cd/sh, and if it doesn't already exist, create this authorized keys file, right? And then let's do sort of authorized keys file, and let's just add the key. All right, so let's paste that. Okay, and let's save it. All right, so now that we have created this authorized keys file, we should be able to connect to this SFTP server as user1 using the corresponding private key. Okay, so let's go back to IntelliJ. All right. And what we need to do here is we need to set the identity. Okay, so we need to add the identity, which is a private key, to JSH. So we do JSH dot add identity, and we give the name of the private key file, which is right here, user1. Okay, so we do user1, right? Okay, so now let's try to connect to the SFTP server, right? Yep, and now there are no errors. It's successful. Okay. Okay, now that we have successfully connected and authenticated to the SFTP server, we can finally open an SFTP channel. And once we have this SFTP channel open, we can finally perform some SFTP operations such as listing directories and downloading files. Okay, so first let's open the SFTP channel. So the way we do this is by calling session.openChannel, and the type of the channel that we have to pass is SFTP. Okay, and let's create a variable. Okay, so we need to cast this to channel SFTP, right? So let's create a cast there, right? So once we create this channel, we should connect the channel. Okay, so we do channel sftp.connect. And when we are done with that channel, we should also disconnect it. Okay, so let's just rename this variable to channel. And let's rename it to channel. And let's try running it and see what happens. No, sorry, there's an error. What is the error? Oh, sorry, I'm doing connect twice. So let's change this to channel disconnect. Okay, let's try running it again. Okay, so there are no errors. It ran, but it didn't do much. So now that we have the SFTP channel open, let's try to list the entries in the root directory. Okay, so let's do something like channel.ls, and let's specify the root directory. Okay, all right. So this here, it will return a vector, right? But it will return a vector of type channel SFTP ls entry. So let's specify the type here, channel SFTP.ls entry, right? And let's rename this variable to entries. Okay. All right, now let's loop through the entries and print out the file name, right? Entries.for. Yep, and let's print out the file name. Okay, and let's just put some helper, let's put some text here just so that we remember which directory we're listing. Okay, so system.out.println entries in directory in root directory. Okay, and let's run it now. Okay, so we have here so as you can see in the output, entries in root directory, and there are 3 entries. Okay, so there are 2 directories and there's 1 file. Okay, so let's enter this directory and let's list the entries in that directory. Okay, so let's do channel.cd to change the directory. So let's go into dir1, and now let's list the entries in that directory. Okay, so let's do system.out. Let's just copy and paste this code here, and let's remove this because we already defined that variable, and let's list everything in the current directory. Okay, And now let's run the program again. Okay, so we still have the output from the root directory, but now we have this additional output here, which is the listing, or I mean the entries in the dir1 directory. Okay, so in the dir1 directory, you can see that there's a file here called download_this.txt. So let's try to download this file. Okay, so the way we do this is we use the get function. So let's do channel.get, and the name of the file that we want to download is download_this.txt. Right, and let's read all of the contents of that file into a byte array. So read all bytes, and let's convert this byte array into a string. So let's do system.out.9 contents of file, and we do new string bytes. Okay, and now let's run the program. Well, let's put contents of file download this.txt, and let's run the program. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So as you can see, we have an additional line here, and contents of file download this.txt is abc123. Okay. So now that we've downloaded a file, let's also try to upload a file. Okay. So the way we upload a file is using the put function. So here we use get. We use a get function here to download a file. So we can use a function called put to upload a file. Okay. So to upload a file, we need to provide an input stream containing the contents of the file. Okay. So we do channel.put, and we have to provide the an input stream which points to the contents of the file that we want to upload, as well as the name of the file that we want to save the contents to on the server. Okay, so let's do put. Okay, so let's do something simple. Let's upload a file which has the contents okay, with the contents upload from client, and let's create an input stream to this content. All right, so let's do new byte array input stream, and let's do contents.getBytes there. And is there an exception? Nope. And let's upload this to a file called uploaded.txt. All right. Okay, so now let's try to run it again. And okay, so everything ran successfully. So let's check the server to see that file that we just uploaded. Okay, so let's go to the incoming directory, and we saved it to the dir1 directory, right? And as you can see, there is this upload file, right? Because we saved it to upload.txt, right? So there's this upload.txt file, and when I open it, the content is uploaded from client. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this video. I plan on doing another video using a different SSH library for Java. that SSH library has a more modern feel to it than JSCH. JSCH is a library that I think was built when Java was still at 1.0, and that's why it doesn't have a feel of a modern Java library. It doesn't mean that it's a bad library, of course, but it just doesn't feel modern. It doesn't feel elegant to use with the latest Java versions. So I found another SSH library for Java, and I'll do a video for that in the near future.